I'm Ryan Betson.
I'm Max Cooper.
And this is More the Players, our supplementary show where we dive deeper into a game that we are lucky enough to have our hands on. And today, we are very privileged to be able to talk about Rise of the Ronin. So this is the latest release from Koei Tecmo's Team Ninja, best known for probably their Neo, at least for me. What about you, Max? Is there anything else that sort of Team Ninja jumps out at you for?
No, it's definitely Neo.
Yeah. Well, in a similar vein, Team Ninja here have taken a lot of the learnings of Neo and have wrapped it in the Shogun, the samurai sort of setting. But Max, in a bit more detail, what is Rise of the Ronin?
So Rise of the Ronin is, as you alluded to, it's set in the later part of the 19th century during the war, the feud between the Tokugawa shogunate and how Japan ended their kind of isolation to the world. It shows the Western influence coming in and how they dealt with that issues.
So different time period to, say, a previous PlayStation exclusive with Ghost of Tsushima. Very different time zone, and as a result, they're handled very, very differently. But let's get into it. So now, as this is a preview, there's only so many things we can talk about, and we'll do our best to avoid. Actually, not do our best. We are not going to talk spoilers or any major of those big beats. So let's touch upon some of the main things right now. For me,
before you dive into
of course.
So straight off the bat, as soon as you start up the game, you are greeted with the message of Rise of the Ronin is a fictional story that takes inspiration from a time of expansion in Japanese history. Throughout their gaming journey, players will encounter historically significant characters and events which shaped the history of Japan but do not represent modern-day ideals of the diverse teams that designed, produced, and published this title. So this is a work of fiction, but there are real-life characters and things that happened depicted in this game.
Yeah, so think in the Assassin's Creed sort of way of, hey, you get to go and hang out with Leonardo da Vinci. Did it ever really happen? No, not really. But it's kind of taken a lot of inspiration in a lot of settings. But at least from the experience we've had so far, it's not quite like that at all. It's like that, but not like that at all, really. It's an interesting thing. But, okay, so as we mentioned before,
100% an assassin, though.
Yeah. Sure. As I mentioned before, this is built by Team Ninja, best known for Neo. There is a clear lineage from Neo into Rise of the Ronin down to how it plays in a Bloodborne, Dark Souls, like Soulsborne-esque feel, which is right up your alley, Matt. So, what for context, what was your stance on Neo and Neo 2, and how does it look over here for you?
So, as far as like Souls games go, I've always preferred the Souls games versus the Neo. So, although the combat is very similar in the sense that you have your light attacks, your heavy attacks, your parries, your dodges, and it has that difficult combat setting. Where Neo differed was Neo was set up in a mission structure where you would boot a mission, you would play this self-contained level of that mission. Once the mission was complete, you would get kicked out and you would pick the next mission, whereas Souls were open world. You would go and you would find things organically as you progress through. That would give you vague overviews of like, hey, this is what you need to do. We're not going to show you how to get there. We're not going to tell you how to do this. Whereas Neo had always been very structured. You had a waypoint. You knew exactly what you were doing. The mission outlined it before you booted the mission up. You knew where you had to go. You knew what you had to do. Rise of the Ronin is a mixture of those two things where it has an open world to a degree. Well, I mean, it is open world, but it still has that mission structure where at the start it says, this is the mission you're going to do. This is what you need to do. Here is the waymark for that mission. And once you're in a mission area, you cannot leave, or you get the message saying you are leaving the mission area. Yeah. So although they've moved away from that instanced mission structure, it's kind of still there in a degree. But the game itself is now an open world title.
Yeah, and that was, cool. Remember you and I were discussing it when we first booted it up and we got into the opening tutorial area. Once again, very similar to Neo, where you have that circumstance where you go fight that big boat demon. Straight up, the same here as well. You're in a boat, take out some some settlers, and then you get thrust into the open world. Remember you were going to me, man, I really wished that Team Ninja would have stepped out of that and gone into that open world space, and then about 10 minutes later you go, nah, we cool. Yeah, because it's like they just got out of it, and then it sets you up out there. So like for myself, as someone that doesn't really dip their toes into a lot of those Soulsborne style games, mostly because I don't have the patience and or skill set to really sit there and properly learn and do. I like just going in and fanging it, and which is really bad when you have stamina meters. But I'm finding this not as unforgiving as say a Dark Souls would, which I appreciate, and the same reason I enjoyed what I played of Lies of Pi is a movie that is unrelated to this at all. Or say the Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order from EA and Respawn. So it is I'm enjoying that. I've picked a relatively standard class in terms of my fighting style. I have a huge Adachi as my secondary, and I have the standard katanas as my main, because for me, it allowed for reasonable good damage and good speed balance. So where the idea of a dual sword, it's a little too fast, it's fast, but it's not quite enough damage for me. Where big, slow and lumbering, I said I don't have the patience and stamina management, attention to detail that would work in my favor. What's the weapon set you're playing with?
So I'm playing with the dual blades.
Yep.
And the spear.
Oh.
So where you opted for big attacks, I opted for essentially damage over time.
Yeah.
So I can get more attacks in, therefore I deal more damage. I just have to manage my stamina a little bit better. Now, like in Neo, they have the same systems in place here. They're just obviously named different things. So after you boot up your character creator, they, instead of picking a class, they refer to it as a blade sharpening origin, which essentially dictates your starting stats. So they've got Killer, which is a strength base, so your strength is higher than the rest of your stats. Breaker, which is Dex. Seducer for charisma. Sapper, intelligence. Beginner is well-rounded. They all have equal stats. And then there's the unsharpened, which has lowered. All stats are lowered.
So if you're like to be mean to yourself, you go that one.
Yeah.
Which did you pick?
I picked Breaker, which is the dex base, and then it gives you your recommended weapons. So it's like, hey, these weapons are what scale with dexterity. We suggest that you pick these, but you are open to pick anything you want at the start of the game. Yeah,
so I went with Striker, and it also recommended me what I had as well, because I do quite like the Odachi as a weapon, because it's this big honking thing, and the blades a stack of fun. But let's pivot that now to about the beginnings of the game where we're creating our character. So this does have a full-blown creation suite where at the beginning of the game you are required to make a both male and a female character, which you then later have the ability to choose one or the other. I had a lot of fun in making Samurai Betsun. It's pretty close. I got mostly there, which is nice. And then for the female counterpart, I made it my partner Phoebe. I was like, this would be funny, because knowing that there is like the co-op within the game. Now we haven't experienced it yet, it's not currently available to us, so we haven't tested it. I was like, oh, maybe they'll, when someone comes into your game later on, they'll bring that, like, they're that secondary character in your story. But as you progress through the beginning of this game, circumstances happen where you have to make a decision, and I went, oh, I'm just picking me. That was easy.
You don't have to make a male and female character. They can both be males.
Oh, can they? Brilliant. Oh, there you go. That's on me. I thought it'd be fun.
I was lazy the first time around. I randomized both characters.
Yep.
My first one randomized to look almost exactly like Mads Mikkelsen.
Ooh.
So it was Mads Mikkelsen with a Japanese top bun, which was hilarious. And my other character was some weird looking Ranger with long flowing red hair. And
See, that's Max's ideal. His Rang genes coming through and gets his lovely luscious locks.
So yeah, as you mentioned, you kind of do the tutorial area, which kind of introduces you and
Well,
onboards
but we
you.
should mention as well, with the character creation suite, now we are playing noticeably early. Obviously, this game isn't coming out until the back end of this month. I did have some little hiccups in that when I was adjusting the voice pitch sliders to try match like my tone or my partner's tone, I was finding that it didn't actually, like, I'd shift it and it wouldn't change. It would give me the same delivery. I'd be like, that's odd. Right, well, if the standard's that, then if I bump it up a couple, because my partner, she speaks slightly higher register than mine, I was like, all right, so we'll put it about there. Obviously press preview, sound exactly the same. Like, I'm just going to wing it. Go in. God, I'm glad I murdered her, because it was one of those things where I'm like, it was that couple octaves too high that kind of hurt my eyeballs. So as you said, like, I went full weeb by accident. Sorry, okay, these are things that will be fixed in coming updates, but from the preview build that we have access to, that's one of the things I went, that's interesting. It'll work itself out.
Yeah.
But yes, as I said, we've got the tutorial area where you go in and it's relatively straightforward. It's a locked instance where you sort of just work your way through and you test out all the little things that you will need to know as you expand into the latter part of the game. How did you find the tutorial? Because, like, as I said, for me, for someone who's not skilled and or equipped in this style of game, I didn't have a lot of trouble. I went kind of smoothly up until the first mini boss, which was coincidentally named Matthew Perry, and I laughed really hard.
It was fine. So it does the whole thing where it onboards you onto all the terminology of what they're doing. So they teach you how to block, and then you stand there just like they're like block 3 attacks, and then they're like, this is how you parry, and parries are called counter sparks in this game. And then they give you a heads up of like, if they're in the middle of a combo, you can't just parry the first blow. You have to parry all of the blows in the combo, otherwise you're still going to get hit.
And then they have their red little finishery attacks, which you can't block, you can only counter it.
Yeah.
And then of course the ki blast as well, which is a big thing within Neo, about rebalancing that ki to sort of assist with your stamina.
I can't think of what they call it here. But yeah, it's ki pulse in Neo, but I can't think of what the terminology they use for
ki blast stands out in my head, so I'm gonna assume it's ki blast.
So yeah, as you alluded to, it helps manage your stamina recovery. So if you do a long combo and you tap the R1 button, you'll instantly refresh 50% of your used stamina. So you kind of can keep that flow and momentum going. There's a whole new gimmick of enemies with ranged attacks. If you parry those ranged attacks, it'll actually ignite your sword.
Yeah.
You'll get bonus damage for a short period of time afterwards. They mention the veiled banners, which essentially work as your bonfires from Souls-likes, where it'll respawn all the enemies in the area unless you have beaten the captain or general of that area. Nothing will respawn then. It kind of gives you like a safety net of you beat that tough mini boss. We're not going to make you fight them every single time you need to respawn.
Which I really appreciate, because much as I enjoy these style of games, as I said, but that idea of having to do it over and over and every single time, it's a persistent annoyance. Like, I'm happy to run the bosses again because that's fun, but all the little little fucking shits on the way to there is what's annoying to me.
So the big change up in combat here, as opposed to Neo, is you have multiple characters in your squad at any given time, and it gives you the option to switch freely between them. So if the boss is aggroed on one character,
in the tutorial area, yeah.
You can swap to the other one, and you can just stab him in the back.
I did enjoy that part was fun.
And you can kind of juggle the aggro of the boss by getting a few attacks in, swapping back to the other character, getting a few attacks in, swapping back. And it incentivizes you to do that because each character also has different strengths and weaknesses. So you may do more damage to certain enemy types with one character versus the other. So you're incentivized to kind of mix it up a little bit, change it up. They'll have different move sets, that they'll use different weapons, they have different special attacks, all that kind of stuff, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. But so we haven't really touched upon the story yet either, mostly because of those spoiler concerns. But the basic premise is that there are two individuals. They are called Blade siblings.
They are veiled. They are the Blade twins, and they are affiliated with the Veiled Edge,
Which is kind of this offshot of samurai. It's this clan of like super trained individuals, and they only tend to be selected by as twins or as two individuals that have experienced the same what alludes to as their same trauma. That they come on board, and then you're bonded with your blade twin.
Yeah, so essentially, you move as one together, and where one fails, the other one shall succeed.
Yeah, which once again alludes to one of the big things of this game is that co-op. As I said, it's not in the build that we have. We haven't been able to mess with it as of this moment. But whether you mention it in the tutorial as well, like that looks to be a key part of it too. So that from a story perspective, it's fine. It's enough. As you begin to start getting things moving. Now we do have like I said, with the build, there is a stop point that we can't sort of experience any more past there. But in very similar to Ghost of Tsushima, I'm feeling that there is not as much in terms of organic story moments throughout the world as you explore and you traverse and you start wandering down the road, and there are little and cool encounters that you'll find, like you get a little banner on your thing, and that helps build your karma within that area, which ensures sort of good responses. I believe that it might assist with some stores or whatever, or the returning of bad guys. I haven't really nailed it yet. I just kind of wander on through and see what I find. But how are you finding the world? Because as you mentioned earlier, wanting to step out of that instant setup, we're now experiencing a world.
Again, like you said, we're very limited in what we can talk about, so we haven't experienced too much of the world at the moment. So when it opens up, you kind of have access to a few things. You can ride a horse, you go through some of the towns, and you find the towns to be abandoned because there's ruffians in there. But then when you kill the ruffians or make them leave, the town kind of comes back to life, and the shops reopen, and you can purchase things and do all those other fun stuff that you can do. And it's very the gear system is exactly the same as what it was in Neo, so it's all color coded. It'll give pluses to this, minuses to that, and you kind of just play the numbers game. But again, because we've had such a limited experience, it's very hard to be like, they do this and this, because I just haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah,
like it's very the start. Even once it goes open world, once you get out of that tutorial area, the first little bit of playable area is very linear. It's here's your waypoint. We need you to go there, and you need to do this before things kind of open up properly. And then it's at that point where we kind of hit that dead end stop where we can't progress.
So it doesn't quite have that sort of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, you come out of the cave and suddenly the whole world's available to you. It's not that at all. However, it is kind of like it goes open, leads you a little bit, and then gives you the abilities to explore the area, although you are still working along that main golden path, for lack of a better term, into where you need to go for the mission structure. But if you want to go off here because there's a shrine that's interesting, or there's like essentially a bandit camp or something, like, oh yeah, cool, I'll go mess about over there. But you are forever progressing forward. Before we jump into our final thoughts, because there's only so much. Post experiencing Elden Ring, which essentially established what is the expectation of an open world Soulsborne style game, are these comparable? Are they non-comparable? Where does it sit for you? Because like people go in with that expectation. Where are we looking?
It's not that. You have to remember that this is a change to the norm of what Team Ninja have been working on in their Neo franchise. This is kind of them slightly stepping out of the box, but kind of staying rubbed up against it. So they've dipped their toe in a bit of open world, but they've still kept that mission structure in place. Whereas Elden Ring is, here's an overarching story. This is, you need to defeat these 4 things. Go find them. Go do this. Go do this. Whereas here in Rise of the Ronin, from what I've played so far, It is, we need you to do this. You need to follow this road to get to this point. Once you get to this point, you need to speak to the, and it's all spelled out for you. It's very hand-holdy in its quest design, with the use of markers and all that other stuff. It's in its combat where it kind of throws you in the deep end and you have to fend for yourself.
Excellent.
So it's apples and oranges. Like, they're the same kind of fruit. I mean, they are fruit, but they're different enough that it would be detrimental to this to compare it to that, as they're trying to do different things.
Perfectly reasonable, and yeah, no, that's a very good understanding. Like, I think it's important to express those things, especially because
it's not like Elden Ring's a Granny Smith and this is a Red Delicious. It's
one's an apple, one's a pear.
One's an apple, one's a pear. Like,
they're similar enough, and like they're both green, but they're different shape. The different one tastes really sandy for some reason. Depends on what pears you buy, I suppose. But yeah, look. So, what's your final thoughts on this before we wrap this bad boy up?
So far, the combat is what's winning me over, as we haven't had a chance to really dive into the story yet. The premise of it seems interesting enough. It will just depend on how the story plays out throughout the game and how tedious those constantly having to switch up your team and stuff to get through combat scenarios. Yeah. But so far, it's pretty good.
Look, so I'm in a similar space. It is the combat that is pulling me forward, and my desire to want to suss it out a little bit, because as I mentioned with Neo, like, Neo really caught my attention back in the day, and I did try really hard to understand it, because it is Soulsborne without being a Soulsborne or a Dark Souls, in that it's not entirely brutal.
We should also point out there's a difficulty setting in this game.
Yes, there is.
There's Dawn, Dusk, and Twilight, which is essentially your easy, medium, hard.
Yep.
Your easy, normal, hard.
Yeah.
So
that's also fun for those that want to experience that. So yeah, so for me, I really kind of like that combat, because if I'm being completely honest, and this is very similar to the discussion we had around Ghost of Tsushima when we played it back in the day. Samurai, Shogun, like that as a theme doesn't really resonate with me, and I don't quite know why. It's just something about Samurai that does make me go, oh, doesn't make me want to like stand there and wear my kimono and do the little like, you know, pop a samurai sword with my thumb. None of that gets me excited, like, even in a little bit. So the fact that I do want to keep playing this is a PlayStation exclusive. Is that part of what's pulling me forward? Yeah, probably, because it's what we do here. It's what we do at this show. So there's kind of wanting me to see it through. But it is a praise to the game that I'm like, oh, I kind of want to like keep tinkering with these systems as we continue forward. Hopefully after this preview space. Sort of then go, okay, we'll experience this and we'll see where it takes me, because the idea of we're going to tell a cool samurai story ain't enough, mate. I'm sorry. But I hope that there is enough within the story to compel me alongside the combat, because I imagine there will hit a point for me where I go, yeah, but we'll wait and see on that. But there you have it. That is our preview discussion around Rise of the Ronin, the latest from Team Ninja and PlayStation Australia. It is a second-party exclusive. It will be available on your PlayStation 5 as of March 21st? 22?
22.
March 22. And you will be able to get our full review on March 21st at 10 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time here on the YouTube channels, also on the podcast services. So be sure to check this out. If you do have any questions about Rise of the Ronin, throw them in the comments below. Hit us up on Twitter. Our handles are above our heads. Or you can follow the show itself at PopCulturists. And we'll be able to answer those questions in the full review, as we will have access to more of the game. But if you have enjoyed this discussion, you've never seen this before, we do a weekly PlayStation podcast called For the Players, the Pop Culture PlayStation Podcast, where each and every week, Max and myself break down everything you need to know about PlayStation through a entertaining and Australian outlook. Like, think about it like a late show. It's entertaining, it's silly, it's fun, but it's also got some good grounding, it's good information. As combined together, we have had over a decade in the games media here in Australia. We know what we're talking about most of the time, so it's always a blast. And that is every Monday morning at 8 a.m. on YouTube. Podcast services 9 a.m. on those YouTubes. But until the next one, I'm Ryan Betson.
I'm Max Cooper.
And that was our preview of Rise of the Ronin. Also, big thank you to PlayStation Australia for providing us the root code. See you in the next one.